the impact of the roster reduction on personnel management and in-season development. That I find this very fascinating because it's something we've talked about in passing with a lot of coaches, right? Is as we've heard, with the legislation and the changing of the times of roster reductions. And obviously that's had the added benefit of roster increases for a lot of programs and the ability to determine whether you're beyond 11.7 or not. All of those things are positives for the sport and giving players the opportunity to get their education for free. But the reality of it is in an era of baseball, and this is the way I always kind of give this, excerpt, is in an era of baseball where Major League Baseball rosters are growing because arm injuries are so prevalent, and we're making 7-day IL stints and all of these things to prevent injuries, and specifically arm injuries. College baseball and the NCAA said, we're going to go the opposite direction, right? Every baseball league is allowing for more rest, more opportunity to rotate roster spots and make sure these guys stay healthy and get their workload management that they need. And now college baseball has just created a system that now we're going to have to expose our guys to more, right? More pressure on their arm, less opportunity to rest and recover, more of those times on short rest and those factors that come into play. So when you think about the roster management and the reduction of rosters, especially a week out from opening day for college baseball, what are the first couple things that come to your mind when you're talking about personnel management and then obviously the in-season development piece?
I think how valuable roster spots became with this. In the past, you would have, at every level programs that had guys that were kind of developmental pieces, guys that were wait and see, guys who maybe weren't good enough to contribute right away, but it's not a problem. We might see a future for them somewhere. Some cases probably favors were done for some roster spots, depending on, connections, who college roommate, things like that. Their son, you throw them a roster spot. They might not be able to contribute in a capacity that helps you, necessarily win or whatever. I don't know. Everyone had a different circumstance, but I think that now with the roster crunch, every roster spot is much more valuable. You don't have the luxury of taking a young guy and saying, hey, if he doesn't contribute for 3 years, it's not that big of a deal. Or, hey, I can do this person a favor. There's probably some uncomfortable conversations that have to be had because every roster spot now, you need to be able to, in some form or fashion, help the team win. And that kind of can make things a little more challenging. You have to be sharper in your recruiting, but I also think that's why the transfer portal, it makes sense that this change came during such a time of transient rosters where guys are bouncing all around every single offseason, because you can flip a roster. If you do a bad job the year before, you can flip your roster and bring in a whole bunch more portal guys. But it also, unfortunately, and like the sad part of this is like some guys need you to be patient, and you have to find a program that is still willing to do that. I think they're out there. You just have to find them. There are less of them for sure. But if you're a high school guy who needs a significant development, it's going to be harder for you to find a program that's patient and will let you kind of get your feet wet, build the maturity, build the confidence to where you can help, because, you might come in and have promise, but for whatever reason, might not have a great first year on campus. You're probably at a school who says, we're going to have to move on and maybe even give you a push towards the portal because they need to compete to win. And that's kind of the balance that there always is. Coaches need to win to save their jobs. Guys have to be able to contribute to that.
Mm-hmm. From the player standpoint and from the transactional nature that college baseball is slowly and actually rapidly becoming with the NIL and this decision, 100%. I think from a recruiting standpoint, it's massive on freshmen and being able to make it to your sophomore year at the said university that you commit to be able to make it through the fall. Like, let's call it what it is. I think we could all probably reach out to somebody who knows somebody who's in a scenario where they thought they had an opportunity at every level of college baseball, whether it's Power 4 or whether it's low-level Division I, who had to find a home at the break, right? All of these things that are realities of the new landscape are going to be a part of the puzzle. And I think that brings me to a point that you made in terms of how valuable these roster pieces are, each number on the roster, 1 through 34 is, and how valuable they have to be in what they're able to provide. And I think that changes what coaches have to prioritize in terms of the bottom of the roster. Whereas 3 to 5 years ago, if I was a Division I recruiting coordinator and I saw a kid who was just tall with long arms and he's 160 pounds soaking wet, but he had 87 in the tank and a really good feel for a breaking ball, and he threw a ton of strikes, and we said, our strength conditioning staff is really good. We think we can mold him into a 93 to 95 mile per hour arm. I could take that guy, right? But the reality is now you have to look at it and say, can this guy provide innings for us on day one? Right? Can he step in and throw enough strikes and be competitive enough to provide some form of innings? And there's different levels of innings, right? There's your 10 up and 10 down guys. There's your ninth inning high leverage guy. There's your Friday night starter, right? So there are tiers, and maybe said prospect could fall into your 10 up, 10 down guy. But there's also the factor of, is that worth investing a spot on your roster to, in comparison to obviously being able to get a Division III guy who has years of experience throwing enough strikes to be competitive. And that's the guy that comes in and collects 20 innings for you. And even if he pitches to a 10 ERA in mop-up duty every Tuesday, but he gets you on the bus sooner, he saves you from using your Friday night high leverage reliever to get out of a jam or whatever it is, or in a blowout, you don't have to exhaust guys that have better stuff or more conference level capable of getting outs in a big game. Those are valuable roster spots, whether those guys throw 78 or whether they throw 98, right? Like, and I think that's the craziest shift now, is like, because everybody who's been in college baseball or been around college baseball, there's going to be multiple Tuesdays in the year where it's cold, it's late, you're up 10, you're down 10, and all you want is a guy that's going to go out there and just burn outs, right? However they get it. I don't care if you strike out the side or if you get 100 mile per hour line drive hit at our center fielder, right? We just need a guy who's going to go out there and eat these innings up 10 or down 10, and make sure that we're not burning guys that are valuable to us and having them exhaust their energy that we're going to need for Friday, Saturday, Sunday to compete for the games that, quite frankly, matter more, right, in the season. And I think that's the most fascinating part of the roster building, is the value of the bottom four on your roster is completely different.
Yeah, I think what makes it so difficult and so interesting is the fact that I think everyone can agree it definitely puts a strain on pitching staffs, right? Because there's limited innings for every guy, because everyone knows, like, typically the teams that play deep into the year, the teams that have good pitching. Everybody, if you talk to every single recruiting coordinator in the nation and you ask them, what do you need? Every single one of them is going to say pitching. It's the most important piece of baseball. Offense, yes, is very important. I don't mean to, say that offense isn't important. Hitting coaches are important. You guys matter. But like, without pitching, nothing works, right? Because you have to have guys that get you into the dugout that can throw strikes. Well, the challenging part of it is there's so many college baseball teams and everybody needs them. And the challenging part is that, what do college kids struggle with the most? Throwing strikes, having command, consistent command, week in and week out, outing to outing, inning to inning within outings. It's what makes college baseball kind of an any given day type of sport, where it's like, if you don't have a guy that can compete within the strike zone, you don't have a chance that day. Because free passes lead to big innings, like all these cliches, everything that everyone who coaches within baseball understands, anyone who watches baseball understands. And when you think about squeezing rosters at the big league level, or like roster size at the big league level, like, those guys are insane. Like, if you took the worst big league, the worst arm on every big league roster and put them in college baseball, their command would be better than just about everybody's. So those guys who struggle in Major League Baseball have ridiculous command when you just talk about the sport of baseball as a whole, right? So when you then talk about college, where everyone's command's a little bit worse, the guys at the bottom of college rosters, the biggest issue when you talk about the 10-10 guys in the past, when you guys talk about the guys who were the 45th player or whatever, it was probably a command issue. Like, a lot of them probably had stuff. They had one pitch at least where, like, it's like this has really good traits. This could be an effective pitch. You just have to throw consistent strikes. So now when you squeeze it down, to your whole point, that works only if you can throw consistent strikes, like you said, and everyone's been looking for that forever. I don't think that more of those guys are going to exist. It's going to make it really tough because and some guys in college, like even your best guys, like your Sunday starter, your midweek guy who consistently throws strikes, when you're better relievers, sometimes they come out and it's like, well, they just don't have the zone that day for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. And that can really affect things when you don't have a number of arms. And we've all been in those situations where it just feels like nobody on the staff that day can throw a strike. And you're just like, I don't know, who do we turn to? And in the past, you probably had 20 pitchers, so you felt like you weren't going to run out. It was going to get ugly for sure, and you probably were going to lose. But like you said, you're just trying to get through that without having to maybe burn guys you don't want to. Um, Now, those guys are even more valuable. Guys who can eat innings, like you said, and that's like a term at the big league level, right? Like how many times do you see a guy at the big league level who puts up average like run prevention numbers or even maybe slightly below, but it's like they're always healthy. They eat innings. They go out there. I mean, Lance Lynn pitched until he was what felt like 60 years old because he was what was called an innings eater, because you could count on him going out there and getting outs. Because the fascinating thing, one of the interesting parts about baseball, obviously, and I'm, shocker here, but like there's no clock on the game. You have to get 27 outs, 21 outs, depending on, home, away, 7, 9, whatever, 24 outs in some situations. So like you need innings eaters to play your schedule. You need to get those that like at the start of the year, you can add up all the outs you're going to need to get through the season. You have to get them. You're going to need pitchers who can do it. Every single guy has to be able to do that in some capacity now. Whereas in the past, you had guys who, okay, so he has major command problems. We can keep him around and hope he develops it for a couple of years.